Hi everybody, today's special guest is Nick Ridgeon. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm really good, you?
Yeah, really good. And we live absolutely miles away, don't we? So if the Wi-Fi connection's not good on this one, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I think it's probably about like a stone's throw away from each other. So
Yeah, we need to set up some kind of like garden tennis activity that goes on between the two gardens.
yeah, I'll get Dave Goodchild to give us a volleyball lesson and we'll just hit it across.
Bob, yeah, well, Dave's been on one of the sessions, so I'm sure you saw him. But yeah, he's been trying to teach me that technique, and I'm thinking, well, I've got a little bit more topspin on my volleyball serve than flat.
Transferable skills, clearly.
So for those who are out there who are thinking, what are these guys talking about already so early on? We both live in South Shields, and Nick is not the only sandancer that's been on. So we've had Jared Deacon on talking about South Shields. We also had Mortimer Primary School on as well. So welcome to the Sandancing Club.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not going to stand dance though. If you're watching this, it's not going to happen.
So Nick, what do you do? Tell me what you do. And we've known each other now for what, 20, 30 years. Was it Newcastle College or Gateshead College originally?
I currently work in athletics as the event group lead for throws, and I do some work with British Athletics on their futures program. So I support a couple of the throwers as part of that as well. But I think we met each other when I was doing my community sports leader award, and we had to do lots of little I think it was Sports Coach UK at the time. I think you came in and did some sort of education with us on that. So that was when I was in year 11, so however old you in year 11, 16, and I'm now coming up with 32, so you've known me half my life.
Wow. So, and then you went into the world of S&C a little bit, and I'm not sure that my session must have been very good, by the way, because you said I did some kind of educational stuff. Obviously not memorable for you.
I was trying to work it out the other day, like which one was it? I remember you did a bit where it might have been on communication, because you did a thing where you had a tennis ball and you had to throw it and everyone had to catch it in turn and you had to introduce yourself or whatever. But it was that whole, I need to focus on something, it's bright, so there was a tennis ball element to it. So it may well have been on communication, but it might have been on, there was various different things. So I think I went to a few of yours, not just one. So that's why it is. I think it's all blurred into one. So.
Oh, see now you're a repeat client, then I must be really good. And I like the fact that I still had a tennis ball, because that's every time you get a bit nervous, I think you have to bring something of yourself with you. So if you bring a tennis ball, and I'm so used to having tennis balls around you, I think it just lowers your physiological state a little bit, makes you a bit more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. I think over these last how many months I've been doing webinars as part of being athletic stuff, and there's on many occasions, because I'm used to just coaching people or working and there's quite a lot of interaction, whereas now with the webinars there's very limited interaction. So there's a chat box, but I can't see their face and who's asking or whatever, and there's been some repeat customers there, but it's quite often I'll have my pen and it's close to it. It's just because I've got something that I can, this is my thing that I can hold on to, and I feel like this is my home and I'm safe. So yeah, I think having something like that tactile nature, maybe there's something in that calms you down. I don't know whether there's any science behind it or whatever, but
yeah, there will be. There will certainly be some psychology around that. And before we get into what we want to talk about, which is, I guess, the world of talent and how do you nurture it and how do you grow it and develop it. We were talking earlier about South Shields and about being a sandancer and how good we are at certain areas. And sport seems to be one of the ones that we still do very well at.
No, I agree. I think we chatted about it before, where I think that sport and cultural stuff are really, really, I think there's just a lot of appreciation by people from South Shields about them. It's whether the government and school thinks that it's an important thing, as we focus more on STEM. I think sport and the arts are really, really important in South Shields, and they're really well respected and supported. How many small towns have got the big events where they have bands playing and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people come down and enjoy it, the amphitheatre where there's just local bands go on, everyone comes and supports it. I think it is really important still for the local culture, the local people. So yeah, I think Shields is good with that sort of stuff. We do support our sports people and musicians and things. So
yeah, with that in mind, Nick, and I'm probably going to get shot everywhere I look for saying this now, but my daughter who's 6 now, she's decided to be the biggest Joe McElderry fan ever. So he just recently did a charity gig for the Customs House, and he actually did a little shout out for Jessica as well on stage. And she was like, ah! And I'm like, it's Joe McElderry. And he's from South Shields, and we support him, and he's brilliant at what he does. But I'm sure there's people out there who are going, Graham, what are you doing listening to Joe McElderry?
Well, we've, like loads of other people, we've been doing like a Friday night lads and wags quiz, and pretty much every week, like we take turns and like which family does the quiz, like out of my mates, and pretty much every week there's a question about Joe McElderry. So I don't think you're the only one that appreciates Joe's music. Not necessarily my favourite, but there's a lot of love for him there. Didn't he do something for the when they had the NHS and carers clap? Didn't he sing at the local hospital or something?
Oh, I'm not sure. He probably did, because he's done a load of charity stuff recently, and he's been home at the moment as well, which is fab, because we actually see him running past the house. So he's doing a little bit of fitness. He runs past our house at least four or five times a week. So Jessica literally stands at the window trying to work out with the watcher. Dad, is it Joe McElderry time now? And I'm like, no, it's not Joe McElderry. So I need him just to give her a little wave. She'll be like 6-year-old biggest fan.
Does she sing?
Yeah, not very well. She takes after her mum. Did I say that on camera? Probably takes after her dad as well, because it's something that I'm not particularly good at. But no, she loves it. She's just learned all the words to the climb.
I'm terrible at singing. I'm not going to sing. I'm not going to dance. I think I'm sort of out of the Shields people. I was definitely into the sport cohort opposed to the singing and dancing. It's not for me. Can't do it.
Me too. So let's get out of our comfort zone a little bit, because obviously, shall we get back into our comfort zone? Let's talk sport a little bit. So we've been talking a lot about talent. And for me, and you've listened to some of the YouTube sessions that I've done, is I struggle to really define it, because I think everybody who you talk to has a completely different slant on what talent is. So let's start off with, what's your slant? What do you think it is?
I think I would start off with saying that the exploration that you've done into trying to work out what talent is probably really, really beneficial in order to see it, because like if talent's one big, I don't know how to describe it, like you're looking at it from loads and loads of different people's perspectives, so you're getting a much more holistic understanding of what talent is then, rather than just on one, like, just from what an S&C coach would see talent as, or what just a sports coach would see. I think that's how I would sort of define talent. Like it massively depends on who's looking at it. Everyone's going to look for potential. I think that's, and someone mentioned that already on the podcast. So like that potential, but that like potential doesn't necessarily mean talent if you don't like use it and hone it and you win the postcode lottery and all that type of stuff. So I think there's a genetic component, but that only is going to take you so far. And I think, we in athletics, we're trying to move towards a more like an athlete profiling type system, as opposed to just a one really blinking, almost like the horses that run with the blinkers on, like one approach to. We used to recruit people onto the programs based on, well, how did they perform that year? Where did they sit on the rankings? And it's just performance, and right, we'll pick those people. Whereas now it's well, we'll look from this side, so we'll look from that side, let's have a look through here, and trying to get a much better picture. So I think, that exploration you've done is probably the best way to do it. I don't think there's one necessarily way to define it, although my wife's an English teacher, so she might have a really, really good definition for it. But and we certainly argue about talent a lot. Like she just thinks that you're born with it, because she makes the example of, well, you're either good at maths or you're not, and I just do not agree with her. I think it's lots and lots of learning that needs to take place, and a talent could be that you learn far faster than other people. Well, why do you learn far faster? Do you not got a genetic makeup for that, or is it just that you are a really curious person, you're interested and excited about it, and you're like a really diligent practicer, which means that you like look like you appear to be talented, but you're not. You're actually just, like, for me, I'm not talented at bowling. However, every time I go bowling, I start in exactly the same spot and I have exactly the same weighted ball, so that I can modify my practice. So I've got a trial and error mechanism. So if I start off really bad, by the end of that game, I'm more consistent, I'm getting better scores. Or when I was on a stag do, I did some go-karting, and I went really slow to start off with and sort of felt my way, and like my scores, like I didn't win, I'm too heavy to win go-karting. It like struggles to trudge around with me in it. But like over the course of it, because I was like practicing all the way through, like I got far better. So by the end, you would go, oh, that guy looks like he's really talented at go-karting. I was at the back, but like my scores were far better at the end. So I think there's a practicing element which helps you utilize your. But I think if in order for you to have the opportunity to spend the time practicing and doing that trial and error, you need to have won the postcode lottery so that you're able to spend loads of time doing sport, doing cultural things like that. Because if you don't, and you have to come home and look after your parents that are unwell, and then you've got to put your younger brother or sister or whatever to bed, and then you get an opportunity to do the things you need to, then you're not going to have that time to do that crazy amount of practice. Therefore, you're not going to be as talented or look as talented. I don't know whether that helps at all, but I think it's multifaceted, and I think your exploration of it it's highlighted that it needs to be looked at in that manner, not just from one angle.
Yeah, it's a couple of things, Nick, and I love that conversation about your thought process through that thing. Two things is, one is that you said that some people look more talented, and I don't know whether they do or they don't. I think they look more talented because that's what I'm looking for. So I think in one of the other interviews, I said my two favorite sports people growing up was John McEnroe and Carl Lewis. And when you look at both of those guys together as athletes, everything was just smooth. It was fluent. It was effort. Carl Lewis running down the track, it was so graceful. John McEnroe picking up a half volley on a tennis court as a left-hander. It was just so easy for those guys. So if that is in my head, that talent is that graceful and that easy, every time I see somebody who looks graceful and effortless, then I go, oh, they're talented. For somebody else who's maybe took a different pathway and think, it's all about hard work, it's about, big, strong tackles, it's about physical prowess. Every time you see somebody who's got that physical prowess, maybe that's where you're seeing that talent as well. So that was a really interesting point that you brought up. And when you're looking at some of the athletes that you work with, Nick, where's your bias on that look?
Yeah, I think the understanding your own bias is a big issue. It's like, so for me, like I look at it, I suppose like I'm a S&C coach by trade, if that is a trade. I know Jared taught like a physical preparation coach. However, I started off coaching all sports. I worked as a multi-skills coach for the council, which meant do all sorts, like from like 6-year-olds right through the full spectrum with like learning disabilities, physical disabilities, all sorts of different things mixed in within that. So yeah, but I still do have an S&C type leaning. So I look at, well, do they move well? What's their basic postures like? What's their coordination like? And then, like we've done profiling of athletes where, I'm conscious that, I've probably put a bigger emphasis on, is this person able to generate these big numbers because I can quantify that, rather than these numbers help inform my decision and they're like the start of the conversation. So, well, why did they get those numbers? What have they been doing? Has that person been like slogged for years and years and years, or is it just like that they've like just produced those because they're longer limbed or whatever? So I still look at things, I think, a little bit through an S&C coach, but I'm trying to become a bit more empathetic and try and see things from other people's perspectives. But again, I did a workshop with this guy who talked about like empathy and like stepping into people's shoes, and he told a good story about he's trying to explain to his son what empathy was, and he said, "Oh, well, it's like when you step into someone's shoes, Daddy." And then well, Daddy, when I stepped into your shoes, I tripped up and I broke my arm. So it's like, well, maybe empathy's not stepping into someone's shoes, because I think you're still going to look at, even if you stepped. So if I looked at things through your lens, I still then I would probably react in a way that I would react, but I would be in your situation. So I would have a wife, I would have a daughter, like I'd look at it through that rather than no, I'd look at it, yeah, through my lens, but I'd put into you. Like I wouldn't actually be fully empathetic of your situation because I've not grown up in the same situation as you. Like I've not had the same life experience, never been to America and done college and stuff there. And yeah, I think I'm going to understand that before I can be properly empathetic.
Yeah, empathy is a really difficult word to describe. And as we said prior to this, we're probably going to fly off on a tangent from time to time. So that's good. And done a lot of work with the police force on empathy as well. And it's a really interesting word because how much empathy do you really want? So if you do say a score out of 100 and you kind of go, I have 100% empathy. I'm the most empathetic person in the world. That's not necessarily a good thing because actually if I work in a hospital or I'm working as a policeman on the ground, actually sometimes I need to take away that empathy because if I have 100% empathy, when I go home, I'm drained. And therefore I don't have empathy with myself. I don't have empathy with the wife. So actually having a lot of empathy is not necessarily a positive, but having some, I think, is important.
No, I think, like, have you done a spotlight before when they go through the different colours of what you might be? So, like, greens.
I deliver quite a lot of psychometric assessments. Insight is obviously the colours one. Spotlight is the one that Sheffield Hallam have just come out with. Myers-Briggs is a little bit older school in terms of introvert, extrovert. I work with an organisation called Thomas International. We look at DISC, so we look at dominance, influence. They all pretty much do the same thing, but it's about what your personality traits are and what your behaviours are associated with them.
Yeah, and like I'm like yellow,
Sunshine yellow.
Engaged, change, and adapt. So when I step in that empathetic zone, it does tire us out. But then I need to learn, like you said, like I need to put that down because that's not going to help us in my next part of the role. So it's sort of empathetic to a point, but also knowing that I might need to put something in place that helps us recover from having to do that empathetic thing or having to be that strong like leader or whatever, or go into a big like statistics mode and be blue and that just so that's one thing that I've learned through being like going through that system, like that I need to put in place like recovery for myself if I had to step into those different areas, because being empathetic doesn't come easy for me, whereas some people might say to you, well, I can be empathetic all day all night and I'm fine. Because they're just really empathetic person. They're this big green ball, whereas it's hard for me. And I think sometimes like people talk about like authenticity. Sometimes I am not authentically empathetic. I want to know how you're feeling as an athlete when you walk into my session because I know I need to potentially adapt the session to fit you.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm empathetic because I actually want to know, whether your boyfriend dumped you or whatever it might be that's going on in their mind. So. And there's quite a few occasions, like when I was working in Northumbria as S&C coach there, where because we're not sport-specific coaches, people open to us far more because they can feel like they can tell us stuff, we'll listen, and we also have no impact on who gets selected in the next game. So I sort of had to develop my empathy as part of that role to like understand it, not necessarily just like they're coming to say these things to me, not just because they want me to address their training program issue. It's because they've got a wider issue and stuff. So, but then also I need to find a line between sometimes like I am not like an expert in this field, so I maybe need to direct them elsewhere to get that support and that. So, but empathy is a like definite one that it helps you massively as a coach, I think, and trying to support athletes and also their coaches.
Just send them down to see me. Craig Heap on his interview was saying, I just send them to Graham, which is great because I love that. I love the story. I want to hear the fact that your boyfriend's dumped you, your girlfriend's dumped you, because actually until you get rid of that, until you're 100% aware of that's the problem, then you can't get rid of it. And if you can't get rid of it, it's going to affect your performance somewhere down the line. I just have an ability to jump in the car and however I've been on the day in terms of my emotional energies, whether they're up or whether they're down, whether I've drained them or not, music for me is my connection. And my friend's a clinical psychologist who used to work for the Priory. And we had conversations over the years about, is this just something by luck? We were talking postcode lottery before. Is this luck that I'm able to get into a car, whoever I've been working with on that day, I can get in a car and I can change my emotional status based on music. And I wanted to know whether that was just luck or whether that was now almost a mechanical strategy and intervention that I'd put in place for myself in order for me to change states. And what he said is, he said, it started off maybe as a little bit luck, but when you were playing tennis and traveling, you were traveling by yourself. And therefore, after matches, what happened was that you'd be by yourself still, because you used, as a tennis player, you travel a lot by yourself, and you'd stick music on. In those days, I think it was a Walkman. So I had a Walkman with a tape in. Yeah, I'll put subtitles for the younger generation later. Tape in and Walkman, and I'd be around. And then all of a sudden, that connection to music would change my emotional state. And over the 400 years that I've been around, then actually what's happened is now that's become an embedded strategy for me. So there's this subconscious approach to, I get in the car if I've had a bad day, because you have from time to time, I'll automatically go to a type of music that gives me a little bit of a lift. Or if I'm kind of a little bit high, I'll go to a different type of music that comes down. Now that's autonomous now, it happens.
The guy who wrote Love Actually, that's how he writes his like love scenes or his sad scenes or whatever. He tries to, so I think it might be a strategy that more writers use, but he like puts on a specific type of music if he wants to write and have a certain type of emotion that comes through it.
Yeah.
So it's one of his sort of tricks to do that. Yeah. But like I never used to train with music. I didn't really like doing it. Like we did some other weird things as well. Like we didn't train with water bottles, because what happens if the water ran out whilst you were playing rugby? You couldn't have a drink. So you just have to learn to sort of, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that was one of the things we did. But we didn't train with music. And when we were in the gym, like I didn't like training and like lifting with music. There were some guys who had like massive, like heavy metal type stuff and trying to provide the motivation. Like I don't know what, like, but for maybe it's because like as a rugby player that went into like decathlons and then specialising in throwing, like most of the time there's not music on during the competition and things, and like I'm not allowed like headphones, whatever, Walkman, mini disc players, whatever, like during the competition. Like so you had to bring your own like motivation. You had to bring your own sort of mood adjustment devices. So that was tend to be like internal. So like I could get like properly hyped for doing a max lift and need absolutely nothing there. And I thought that was like, it wasn't something that I did straight off, but like it was like linked similar to what you're saying. Like this is a behavior that you've learned because I knew I couldn't have those things. I've learned the ways to adapt to be able to get a max lift when I don't need anything to sort of push us there.
And the really smart. Go on, Nick.
No, you're right. Go.
I was just going to say the really smart people are made aware of that optimal state pretty quickly, because they're aware of the fact that actually I've just had a really good lift. This is what I need to do because I've got another lift coming up that doesn't drain my energy so much that I have a really poor lift or a poor throw or a poor game, but actually the other way around as well. So I actually had a really bad game or a really bad throw. I now need to up it. So understanding that awareness of those energy levels are the only way you can then start to make some change in order to have some impact, in order to have some action on the next one. And that's what the younger players that I work with, they really struggle with that, because they're, especially in tennis, because it's an easy one to say, they'll lose a game, but then that game then gets dragged to the next 2 or 3 games. And they've lost 4 games. But they haven't lost 4 games on ability. They haven't lost 4 games on talent. They've lost 4 games on that one game because they just weren't aware of what happened quick enough. And therefore they just keep repeating because they're in that mind slot.
Yeah, I think interesting we talk about like what lens we look at the world. Like, so it reminds like that sort of being able to work out where you need to be, where your energies need to be focused on, or like whether it's on or it's off. Like, have you seen like where highly skilled athletes and they're trying to work out which muscles are on and which muscles are off, and like when it's an unskilled athlete, there's like that that they're all sort of firing all at once and it's a bit uncoordinated, whereas when you're highly skilled, you either like, or like F1, you either have your accelerator down or you've got your brake down. There's no sort of like halfway between, and they can sort of differentiate between it, but that comes as like becoming more skilled. So I think, yeah, from a physical perspective, sometimes you want your quad to be on, you don't want your hamstring to be on, and like if you turn your quad on, it's going to slow you down that action that you do. And so, yeah, that sort of the red light, red, blue, red, red, that went through my head as you were talking about that. That's interesting. Like but it is, I think it's a skill thing, isn't it? You learn, like, so if that tennis player then was sat down, okay, so why did those 4 things happen? If they go back and then they can recognize that behavior as they're going through and like attend to that behavior or that stimulus that's happened, then they can affect it. But if they're not able to be, or they're not able to attend to that issue, then they can't make progress. So as a coach, is it your job to sort of highlight that and get them to reflect on it, or is it to, I don't know, like you need to be able to speed that that process of learning up, don't you, to get them to be, So.
And then I'm glad you mentioned that as well about accelerating that process of learning, because that program that we run called Optimum State is about, one, understanding the learning, accelerating the learning, but then being aware of the situation, but aware of the situation internally and externally in order for you to actually just fulfill your ability level. Because we can't expect players or athletes or business people to play above their level this much, because they're not ready yet. This is where they're at. This is the reality. I can only throw this distance. I can only serve this fast. Okay, so why are you comparing yourself to being up here? You can't. But you have to at least be able to play that level. Now, so many people play below that level because of the fact that they're not aware of the situation, the pressures, the anxiety, the stresses, and therefore they're just underperforming.
Yeah, we had a workshop a while ago with British Athletics, and one of their sides came and he delivered, like, and it was like a 3-part model. So it was like the task demands and your understanding of whether you're able to do that task or not. It had one about like the importance or the relative importance and the perceived level of importance of whatever you're doing, and then the other one was around your physical competency. I think it was physical competency to be able to do that. And at different times you might feel like, oh, I just feel really tired, like I can't do this. And as a coach, I would go, right, they're talking about the physical stuff, I need to switch them round, and I need to get them to start thinking, well, actually you're highly skilled, you've been through this action so many times that you can do it. And then, or if you can shift them around and go, well, actually, this matters a lot to you. You've trained really hard for it, and trying to slide to find that 3 out the same size. You can do it. No confidence in your physical ability. Like, you think it's far too easy. Like the tasks, just I could do this in my sleep, and you're not going to have optimal performance. So when Hugh went through that with us, it was really interesting to kind of trying to listen to athletes when they come, like between rounds and stuff, and then change their focus, or either be a hype man and big up, actually you can do this stuff, you've just this, you've done this millions of times in training or whatever, or I'll shift their focus to elsewhere. And it's a nice little tool that I've stolen off you or whoever made it, like sort of shift their focus, but then hype up or sort of down to it might be the World Championships and the event you've for 12 years, however, we're going to go into a circle and throw a hammer. That's it. So you've thrown a hammer in a circle, in that circle, loads and loads of times. So you just sort of descale it. So that was quite useful for us to hear about, like, in terms of how we get people to look at their own perspectives. But it's very flexible. So I've used it in loads of different situations within training, but also competition. So
that makes sense. That makes sense. And we had a little Wi-Fi issue there, so you're back, which is quite good.
Sorry.
It brings us to the second point that you'd mentioned, talking about talent, and one was how we see it, but the other thing was joining the dots. And I think you're spot on. Is if I'm an S&C coach, I see it this way. If I'm a coach, I see it this way. If I'm a parent, I see it this way. So we're all seeing the wrong thing, maybe. How do we connect the dots?
I don't think we are seeing the wrong thing. We're just seeing our thing, and it's that strength through diversity of your team, which is really, really important. So if you've got a diverse team that's got lots of different approaches, then you're going to come to a more holistic understanding of what you've got in front of you, as opposed to who are carbon copies of each other and see things very similar. Like, that's not going to add much. I think you need to have that diversity opinion and things in order to have a deeper understanding of the whole picture.
Okay.
But trying to get that in all of your teams like is really hard. Like I know within the throws team within England, I've got talent event lead for shot, discus, jab, and hammer, all white middle class men. My regional coaching leads, I've got 4 of them, white middle class men, and like so we try and get diverse in those groups, but like, at the minute we're not there yet. So I think the diversity of approach and perspectives is really, really key to get within when you're discussing is this person talented or not, because it really matters to that athlete if you keep them on program or not. Like I think, and if we can give people the opportunity for as long as possible, and which is why we're trying to kind of play around with this youth talent program to evolve it into something that's really useful and keeps people in the system. And yes, like when they get into the junior talent program, they'll have a differentiated level of service and things. However, with multiple entry routes to the sport and to that talent system, that can only be better, really. So yeah, but it is hard. I think that, and if someone's got like completely opposite view to you, trying to get you to understand and see it as values can be really key. But I think that you get some of this, if everyone just like nodded along like as a yes man, like just you don't get progress. I think you need that disruption.
All right, here we go then. Let me throw this question out at you then. And I'm going to go back 400 years from when I was playing. And let's have a look at my team. So my coach is going to say, actually, Graham's got quite good hands. Technically, he's quite good. My psychologist is going to say, Graham on court is he's a fighter. He's hard to beat. He's emotionally quite strong. He's quite aggressive. My tactical coach would probably turn around and say, he's only got one way of playing, and if that doesn't work, he's in big trouble. And then my S&C coach is going, oh my God, he's 5'11", he's got spaghetti arms, he does no lifting at all, he's got no chance of making this a performance athlete. What do you do with that? Because actually the talent word is really strong in some cases and really, really limited in others, isn't it?
So this is where like the profiling comes in. Yeah, so you've talked like a big range of different things there, and then you could still reach your optimum, but then it's working out like, and I'm trying to go like a coach-centered model, like or athlete-centered, but like the coach is sort of, especially at youth talent program, is orchestrating that system. So it's a case of what do they want to prioritize as a coach? Where do they see that like the next development in? So you're like eating the elephant in chunks. You're not trying to like, well, weak, so I need to do all the strength stuff. Well, that might actually take us 12 years to develop the strength base that we need to get like that full physical preparation and robustness. We can maybe do some of these and implement like, well, can we do a better warm-up? Will that give us some of that robustness right now? Like, and have those quick wins. But I think it comes down to the priorities of that coach. But the coach is going to have to absorb all of that information and then make the next step. But at least they've got all of the information to then make an informed choice, and then you can challenge them based on that. So you think you need to do this, well, have you considered blah blah, and you have that dialogue, like their opinions and the data that they might have to back those opinions up are only the start of that discussion. So yeah, I think you've just got to try and prioritize, like, can I make you taller? Well, the age you were, potentially could we look at nutrition strategies? Like, no, we're probably not going to be able to do that. You should have chose your parents more wisely.
Yeah,
like, can we make you stronger, more robust? Yes, we can potentially do that sort of stuff. Like, technically, if your coach is already saying, yeah, they're pretty technically good, happy days, would you be better technically if you were better physically? Those things might be linked, so we can do something that might affect the other. And then, but the bit you said around like, the tactical stuff, if you're a one-dimensional player, I would say there's a potential quicker win. We can expose you to different types of players just through, depending on how you learn. Do we need to look at other players and what they do? Do we need to like modify your practices to try and challenge you tactically in different formats? Whole like boxers, like all fight different like style people, whether it's tall, whether people that love it like a right-handed compared to left-handed or whatever, in order to get them ready to be able to be adaptable in the situation. So for me, I'd look at that and go, that's potentially the low-hanging fruit there, and I would make a case to your lead coach around that, and then what they do and what you decide to do. Because I think the personal coach and you as the athlete need to be accountable to whatever decision we make, because it's going to affect the training program that we put in place for it and those practices. So, but that would be my recommendation in that situation that you described there.
Great. No, I love that, and I think that's how we do connect the dots. And I think the best team in terms of support staff and coaches do that. And I think if we start listening to that model a little bit more, we will stop parents from turning up to athletics club and going, "This is my little son Johnny. He's 6. He's going to be a javelin thrower."
Yeah, definitely. Like. They're just an athlete or a person that, hasn't, and a joy and a love for throwing javelin, but they could do all these other things, which may well help their javelin in the long term, but also give them a wide breadth of experience and everything else that we do sport for. So, but I would still say, well, if they love it and they're really passionate about it, then we need to sort of provide them with that opportunity at the same time. But yeah, trying to still develop that wider athlete and person is key, I think. There's no such thing as a 6-year-old world-class javelin thrower.
No. Or tennis player, by the way. There's very few world-class 6-year-olds at anything. So it's about, and I think that's where the nurturing comes in massively with talent, because we have to build the right environments. We have to understand them as people. We have to understand their emotions. We have to understand the sport. And therefore, we have to build this environment for that talent, that ability, that potential, whatever word we want to use. And I think we throw in fun as well.
You don't need to worry about it.
Because at 6, I just want to have a lot of fun at 6-year-old. I don't really necessarily need to have the seriousness of some coaches that they still have. I need to have a lot of fun and enjoyment. I need to have a lot of learning.
Mm-hmm. Like we want it because we want to have a good experience. We want to be able to tell good stories and have good memories. That's what we'll want from our lives. So we need to provide that as an opportunity. That's key, I think. That fun element. Like I'm trying to write this talent playbook and how do we develop throws for like the long-term youth right the way through. And it's underpinned by the ideology that throwing far is fun. And it just all sort of goes from there. So yeah, like yes, we'd love to be the best throws nation in the world, and we'll put, when we're nowhere near it, loads of us today be looking from Olympic level down to like the Youth Commonwealth Games, nowhere near where we want to be. But we can start heading towards it. It's all underpinned by throwing far is fun. Like everyone likes it. So yeah, you can't go too far away from that, I don't think. But fun is also something that is totally multifactorial and dependent upon the individual. Like what I perceive as fun is totally different from what you might perceive as fun. Like I enjoy once a month with my pals, but I do not want to do it forever. Like my perception of fun is totally different. So did the Wi-Fi go again?
Yeah, it did. We had a little sneaky off there. And I think that was me on this occasion, Nick. Right.
Sorry. It's because all that live on this street will not get fibre optic, and I want it, but we'll see.
I think Joe McElderry's just doing a little sneaky session somewhere.
Maybe.
Nick, one last thing. We just talked about parents. Let's finish off with coaches, because I still think coaches, one, because they don't necessarily understand the word talent, but two, they're seeing it through their own lens. And let's use a little South Shields analogy to finish off. Being the under-8s Ben's Park football coach of the year doesn't necessarily help nurturing talent, does it?
No. It might. I think one of the people that you've had on before talked about like talent within coaching as well, and trying to spot talented coaches. That person, if they've done a good job with this 8-year-old team, like might be a really talented coach who's got fantastic communication skills and is really accountable for you because they've got loads of good procedures in place. But that group doesn't necessarily. They are not necessarily talented. There's potential that they might be talented, but right now it's too early to tell. Push that down the way, let them have an experience, put them in a good environment where they can learn, get exposure to lots of different challenges and have fun, and then they might see that they're talented later on. But I think part of it's a systemic thing in terms of like how Sport England funds sports, and there is a bit of competition between like, Sport England and UK Sport, how they fund sports, and there's challenge and competition between individual national governing bodies, and they've got to get talent in their pool rather than seeing it as like, or more, when I used to be a club and coach sport officer at clubs, I would challenge them and say, well, you've got a welcome letter, where's your exit letter? And if someone was to make the decision to leave your club and go move elsewhere, for example, they went to North Shields, don't know why they would do that, but they went from South Shields to North Shields, having an exit letter and going, well, actually, continue doing sport in some form. If you want to do athletics, this is the local clubs over there that you could do. If not, these are some other things that you do off where you could like signpost them to where they could find information about staying in sport. Whereas I think it can be a little bit like, I just need them to be in my sport and not in any others, which I don't think is healthy for us to try and develop a nation of people that love sport, enjoy sport, and get a lot from it, from a physical, mental, all those other aspects. So,
Nick,
that
thank you
was
very much
definitely
for
a
that.
long-winded answer.
I think I'm going to have to get you back on to do a whole NGB talent. What is talent? What is a talent at NGB?
Yeah, an interesting discussion, I'm sure. It would be good if you can have more than one UB person on at the same time, and we can maybe have some different perspectives coming in. So that was just only mine. I can only talk about my view on things. So,
brilliant. I'm now going to go in the garden. I'm going to go and throw a ball over the fence, see if I can reach your garden. But Nick, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully we've still heard you, even though the Wi-Fi was off a little bit. But let's speak soon about some other topics, and I wish you well with what you're doing.
Cool. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers, Nick.